All right, what's going on, everybody? We have our 11th episode today of the Corbin Claypool Show. Today I have on a good buddy, somebody that started running for the assembly. We're going to get into this. His name is David Tangipa. Did I pronounce that right, man?
Tangipa.
Tangipa. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Tangipa. So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, man, what you're doing, a little bit about your background, and let's kind of jump into this.
Yeah, no, of course. But actually, I don't know if you remember, but we first originally met at Bold.
I do remember
5
this.
years ago when we started, and I remember you were at a table because, I worked in real estate, still work in real estate, and you were at a table with all the lenders, and you had talked about certain goals that you want to make and all of that, and I absolutely love seeing where you went when you got there, because that, I think, was about 4 or 5 years ago, and where you're at now, and so I love seeing that, and so congratulations with everything that you've done as well. I'm excited. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, Bold was, I feel like it was actually a good time in my career. It advanced me in a lot of ways. You remember Natalie?
Yeah.
The girl who spoke? She's awesome. But it just kind of got me into that prospecting mindset, so it was good. It was a good thing.
I think the training from Bold relates a lot to, what I'm doing now in politics and trying to run and doing all of that. So just, again, I'll go back and answer your question. So my name's David Tangipa. I'm running for State Assembly District 8 and originally from Sacramento, born and raised, grew up in North Highlands, California. I got the ability to play football at Fresno State, and so I got to walk on in 2014 after at my high school we weren't the best. We were actually horrible. And came out here, walked on, had the opportunity, earned a scholarship, got a degree in political science, criminology, was really focused on the legal studies certificate. Then I decided not to do that route, got a master's in business and real estate and everything else, and now I'm here today.
That's awesome, man. So tell me a little bit about that. First off, what position did you play in football?
I played tight end, fullback.
Tight end. Okay, tight end and fullback. Okay. So what got you into football? And you said you grew up in Sacramento, right? So when did you start playing football, and how did that look growing up? What neighborhood? I know we talked a little bit about the neighborhood you grew up in, and that brings, I think, some passion in what you're doing on the political side.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of tell me a little bit about that, man. Let's jump into that.
So North Highlands, California is an area that was really hit hard from some budget cuts that happened in the early 90s and all that. So the area of northern Sacramento, because we're in Sacramento County, very rough area. Near Del Paso Heights, Watt Avenue and A Street is where I grew up. I went Poplar School, or Poplar, the street, is where I lived. And the elementary school I went to was Arrowhaven, right in the middle. And so our neighborhood was devastated when an air base, McClellan Air Force Base, was shut down. We lost about 175,000 jobs after that. 75,000 or 150,000 jobs, 75,000 base men and women stationed there, and about 75,000 around just because the money from the base was now gone. And so it turned into very, very poor area. I remember growing up, the house across the street from mine in California was bought for $20,000. The house next to mine was bought for $34,000. Wow. The house that I grew up in for a long time was worth maybe $50,000 because there was such a vacuum. So what happened, it actually created a pretty rough area to grow up in, and I grew up with a lot of individuals in Tongan family, Polynesian family, all different backgrounds, but we grew up in a really rough neighborhood. A Street was known in Sacramento as one of the most dangerous streets. Watt Avenue was known as one of the #1 areas for prostitution in the state of California.
Wow. I
grew up right there, right next to the railroad tracks. Actually, my house, the backyard, was basically on the railroad tracks right off of Roseville Road, which is now seen as Skid Row for Sacramento. So many homeless that lived there, and so I really grew up there. Got into football in the seventh and 8th grade, middle school. I was a lot bigger than most of the kids at my time in the.
Well, you're what, like 6'5" now?
I'm 6'4".
Okay.
Yeah, 6'4", about 240, and but at that time in the 6th grade, I was about 6 foot and 210. So I was a pretty heavy kid.
That's just huge.
Yep. And I actually haven't grown since the 8th grade. I've been 6'4" since the 8th grade.
Right.
So I wish I was a little bit taller, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But I was there, and I grew up with a lot of neighbors that were different. I would say they were different in some of the things that they were in and all that, but they saw some of my athletic ability.
So let's kind of jump into that a little bit, if you don't mind me. So what kind of stuff, you don't have to name anybody, of course, but what kind of stuff were your neighbors into? And if you don't want to get super detailed, you don't have to, but let's give people an idea of the area that you grew up in, and
It's a very high area for gang activity, drug dealing, prostitution, all of that. Like I had stated, there's an old Cargo Largo, which I don't know if anybody remembers that business or corporation that shut down and was an empty warehouse that a lot of people were using as, just places where they could store some of these prostitutes. I worked at a McDonald's off of Watt and Myrtle, right on the railroad tracks, and I remember when I was there were individuals that I would actually have cookies ready for and prep and all of this because they were about to start their shift on Watt Avenue is essentially the way I describe it. But I grew up with neighbors that participated in a lot of those activities and gang activities, drug dealing. I mean, the A Street Crips is something that was really known in Sacramento. My high school, and I think it was a little bit around everywhere in California, we really weren't allowed to wear blue and red. And
interesting.
The rival high school to my high school, we weren't even allowed to play each other because of the amount of gang activity that would happen.
In football, you guys weren't allowed to play each other.
We're not allowed to play each other in any sport. And so,
is that just because people would just get too aggressive and want to almost kill each other, basically?
Oh, exactly. Well, people would kill each other. And so North Highlands, Highlands High and Foothill High School, we were not allowed to play each other. They still don't want to let them play each other today, even though a lot of us are pretty mixed now. And, things kind of get, it's like the Romeo and Juliet rules where you get everybody in North Highlands, and then you get the Foothill, and then they interblend, and then friends become friends, and then it kind of mellows out a lot.
So what contributed to you being so purposeful, so disciplined, and not getting into that stuff, man? How did that happen, right? Because people have easy upbringings, right? And it just kind of comes to them. Whereas if you're growing up in a neighborhood like that, I'm sure there's different challenges that many people don't have to face. So how to go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's the biggest thing that I'm so thankful for my mother. I look at my mother and a lot of what she's went through. So my mom's from the island of Tonga. She immigrated here when she was about 24 years old in 1993. And then she worked under the table, did a lot of things, took care of my grandmother on my father's side, and they ended up getting together and produced two of us, and now two others later. But I really thank my mother and what she did, because when we were younger, we lived in absolute poverty. I mean, my mother's an illegal immigrant, my father's 100% disabled veteran. We lived in my grandmother's just house that she was able to get caretaking at, and so which was a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot, right next to the railroad tracks in North Highlands. And I remember waiting in food lines when I was younger, and my mom would always tell us, I mean, I'm 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. She said, you may be the poorest American, but you're the richest Tongan because you're here in America, and you need to be thankful for it. While we were waiting these food lines at Trinity Life Center or at any of the churches like that, my mom would make us work the same food lines, that if we're going to get boxes of food from these individuals, we're going to give boxes of food for these individuals. My mom had nothing. We were riding on public transportation. She would literally, whatever she could do to get dollars to even get us into the North Highlands community pool, my mom would try to do everything we can. And at that time, I really didn't realize how much she was doing with what she had. And that is where I'm extremely thankful for her on that portion, because she protected me from getting into that lifestyle. She protected my brother from getting into that lifestyle. She protected all of us, because I'll tell you this, my mom's a big Tongan Polynesian lady. There's a lot of gang members out there, but nobody was more afraid than me of my mom. So she made sure, and she would always tell us about education, because my mom didn't even get the chance to finish middle school, because in Tonga it's very limited. If you're not an educated individual and you don't show promise early, you're wasting time. So they send you to basically to work for, you'll work for another family. And we're from an even smaller island in Tonga called Niua. And there, if you're not seen as somebody who has potential when it comes to education, you will become somebody who does work for another family. And luckily, my mother, actually, that family that my mom was working for, was able for her to get off of the island and to come here.
Wow. That's an amazing story, man. So growing up, you kind of talked about, the tough times, and then you had some protection, right, because of your athletic ability. So let's go into that a little bit. How did that come about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually I had a neighbor that I love, and I think he played a really big role in football because we would always talk about it, and he'd watch it in his garage, and I'd kind of get into it, and then I remember I wanted to play football. I looked at my living situation. I realized this very young when I was in the 7th grade that I didn't want to kind of be just the same. I didn't want to live in a very small house that was crumbling, falling apart. The floor in our bathroom actually fell through, and we had put plywood that was basically just in front of the toilet so that way we could stand on the floor because it was so dry rotted.
Wow.
Our roof caved in on my brother, and all we did was put plastic bags and tarps on top of it.
Wow.
The room that I grew up in was absolutely covered in mold, and I looked at it in the 7th grade. I was like, I don't want this. I want to be better. And so I looked at, well, how do you get out of the hood? Most people are rapping, trapping, or they're playing sports. And I can tell you this, I'm not a rapper. I'm not going to sell drugs, and I could be a sports player. I could be athletic. And so I was bigger than everybody. Everybody would always ask me, well, how come you don't really play sports? Or why aren't you into it a little bit more? And I got addicted to it. I started watching some of the games. I watched the Super Bowl between the Indianapolis Colts and the Bears, and the opening kickoff. And this was one of the first games that I ever watched. Opening kickoff, Devin Hester takes it all the way to the house, and I was hooked. It was really that moment that hooked me into football, and I started to really get into it a lot more. My mother would actually set up lawn chairs and not cones, but paper plates on the middle of my front yard, and she didn't know anything about football, but she would say, like, if you want to do this, like, you have
trying.
to, like, jump over the chair. And I would literally throw a ball in the air as high as I could and catch it as many times as I could. And that's really where it went. And then I had a neighbor, and the neighbor watching, he's a big Dallas Cowboys fan. He saw, I believe he saw some potential. He would always feed me. He'd make sure that we'd have enough food to eat because he saw how hard I was working. And it was something that I'm extremely grateful for that family because they did protect us.
Right.
Even though some of the activities around the area were horrible. I've seen some really, really bad things and, very difficult things to kind of like be protected from that. But I had individuals in the community that saw it, even though they may have been gang members around that are extremely close to me. They said that you got potential. You got potential. Your grades are good. You are athletic enough. You don't need to be in this because you are somebody who can go and do some better things. And so I focused on it, and I just literally tried as hard as I could.
That's amazing. So then you went, what high school did you go to again?
Foothill. I went to Foothill High School. Yeah.
And they weren't a great football team.
We went 1-9 my junior and my senior year. Yep.
Wow.
1-9, yep.
But you still played for Fresno State, which Fresno State's a pretty good football team. So tell me how you guys got put on with Fresno, or how you got put on with Fresno State. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was originally going to go to San Jose State.
Okay.
But at my high school, if you're 1-9, recruiters, they're really not going to show up in that area in Sacramento. Everybody wanted to go to Grant High School to find them because Grant is one of the number one schools in the nation when it comes to getting people out in Sacramento. But Foothill High School was kind of on the auxiliary. And so what had happened after not being able to go to San Jose State after a couple issues, I'm very thankful for my coach, Tim Trokey, who just begged the Fresno State coach, Cameron Norcross, who was the online coach. He's like, just come and check out this guy. He's working out. Coach Norcross walks into the back weight room and gym, and he was like, well, I didn't know you guys had athletes, because I was a lot bigger at that time. I was training as hard as I could because I had just lost my ability to go to San Jose State. They didn't want me anymore. And I was training as hard as I could. I was like 230 pounds and 6'4" at 17 years old.
That's insane.
I was pushing as hard as I could because I felt jaded from what had happened. And he comes in and he was like, well, I want you to send me the film and all this. And so I do. And they send me back an opportunity. And they're like, well, I still had a scholarship from Menlo College, which doesn't even have football anymore. Humboldt, which I don't believe has football anymore. Sac State was kind of hanging around a bit. UC Davis, all of these areas were hanging on. I didn't want to stay local. I wanted to play at a higher level. And so they offered me a walk-on spot, and I decided to jump at it. And I was like, I'll bet on myself. I don't have any friends, family here. I don't know anybody. I've never heard of Fresno before. Well, other than my recruiting trip at San Jose State was the game that San Jose State beat Derek Carr, and Fresno State football team that actually stopped them from going to the Fiesta Bowl.
Oh.
That was when I was supposed to go to San Jose State, but they offered me that walk-on spot, and I just bet on myself. I said, you know what? Why not? Just go and take off. Get out of here. Get out of North Highlands. Get out of being stuck in that rut.
So you got out of there, and then did you lived on campus at Fresno State then as you walked on? Or
Yep.
Okay.
I lived at Palazzo's.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
But this is a time, too. Everything was kind of cheap here. Palazzo's
Right.
is expensive now.
And it's super nice too. So that was probably a huge upgrade from where you grew up. I mean,
Oh, yeah. It was actually the first – I never had a true bedroom until I got to the Palazzo's.
Wow.
You know, most of my life I slept on the living room floor. I slept on the couch, or, you know, the room that I slept in wasn't what most people think of as a room. It was more, I slept in a storage room, I guess. And my brother slept in the laundry room. And so it's quite a bit different that I got to Fresno State first time ever having actual like bedroom.
Wow.
And it was, brand new to me. I didn't even have a cell phone until I was a senior in high school. And and I actually shared a cell phone with my brother as a senior in high school. So when I got here, and this is kind of some of the benefits that I did get with my father, 100% disabled vet. So in California, they have I got Chapter 35 benefits, which is if you go to college, they supplement. And at that time, I got $900 a month for going to college.
Wow.
And so that really helped out. And my rent at the time was $550, $525 a month with a $25 parking fee. And so in the car that I drove, my dad had traded a gun for. And we got it that way. Legally, he
Right.
traded a gun for, and we got a 1994 Volkswagen Passat with the struts broken in the back, so it rode like a lowrider, like I was bouncing, and so got it for about $25 in value, and so
Right.
went to Fresno State and kind of went from there. And the good thing about the plazas at that time too, they needed people to kind of be there, so there was no first and last month's rent, there was nothing, and it was 50% off your first time, so $250 was what got me into the door. And while I worked at McDonald's, I also worked at a car wash. I had saved a lot of money to get me there.
You worked 2 jobs, you played football, and you're going to college.
Well, and I
Full
painted
time.
houses.
And you painted houses.
I painted houses.
So you're doing 5 different things at one time.
It was not
Right.
at Fresno State though,
Not at
but
Fresno State, okay.
in high school, yeah. So I worked at McDonald's. I painted houses. I worked at a car wash that was called Dirt Busters. I paint. Well, did I already say I painted
Yeah, you
houses?
painted.
Yeah. So I did as much as I could to get kind of my own income, so that way I can. And I also did. My first job was actually door-to-door newspaper sales for the Sacramento Bee. That was a bad idea because in the age of digital, when things are coming up, not that many people are going to buy some newspaper subscriptions. So,
Right.
but yeah, I was trying as much as I could because again, I did not want to be complacent with, it's not normal kind of living in this condition. It's only normal if you allow it to be.
Right. And so now we kind of have an idea of your background,
Yeah.
right? And we can kind of see why you're so passionate about making change, right? So tell us a little bit about, like, first off, what is the assembly? Because I think a lot of people don't even know what the assembly is, the districts and all that. Can you explain that a little bit and tell us a little bit about what your goals are with running, and let's get into that.
Well, I think 90 to 99% of people really don't know what the assembly is. It's basically the House of Representatives. Everybody knows what a congressman is for the United States. It's basically Congress for the state of California. So that's just the easiest way to describe it. There are 80 assemblymen in California. Each one represents right about 500,000. We have about 40 state senators that represent about 1 million. And so that's the easiest way to kind of do it. And then what was it?
No, yeah. So just kind of tell us a little bit about, your goals going into the assembly, what changes you want to make, like what's driving you to do. Obviously, the upbringing drove you to do this, and let's kind of go into that.
Well, it's really, I look at the state of California, and I'm somebody who's at the bottom of the totem pole. I mean, I know what it was at the bottom of the totem pole, and now I'm a business owner and working in real estate and helping people, and I have a passion for real estate because I got into it because I knew that the number one driver to getting people out of generational poverty was home ownership. I helped over 60 of my friends become first-time home buyers when most of our parents and everybody that we grew up with were generational renters, you know, and now there's so many of them right now that are so well off that are early and still in their younger 20s and or mid 20s. And so I look again at the state of California, and I really think that our government and our policies and what's coming out is making people complacent with being, again, that normal of, hey, we're going to supplement your, you know, abilities, or we're going to supplement, we're going to take care of you, and we're going to do these things, where I think that's the completely wrong and opposite way. We're actually creating a group of people who become dependent on government, but the government can't solve these issues. The government creates the issues by doing that, and we've lowered the standard of what it means to be, you know, aspirational. We've lowered that standard, that we're killing aspiration, and it's so expensive here. The average home price in California is $822,300, according to CAR from 2022.
That's insane.
I think about individuals like me at the bottom of the totem pole who grew up that way. How can you ask somebody to buy a house with $800,000 house? It's not going to happen. It's what, a $7,000 mortgage right now in this market?
Probably more.
Exactly.
Probably more, yeah. It's crazy.
And so I think about why I'm running, and I'm running to actually bring back common sense to California and to think about those issues at the bottom in a different way from somebody who lived that experience. You know, I grew up in it. I know what it takes, but I also know that we need to be in a business-friendly mindset, because I know what the business owners are going through. It's the hardest state in the union to deal with business. We're the fourth largest economy in the world, and yet what do we have to show for it?
Right.
Rolling blackouts, highest energy cost, a train that we can't finish, public transportation's horrible, we can't finish projects on the highway. Fourth largest economy in the world, and we have nothing to show for it. That's the part that I think people need to realize and wake up, is that we need to try something different.
And there's businesses leaving in droves.
There's
right?
businesses leaving.
Texas and these other areas, Florida, right? You hear it all the time. So I want to ask this question. So, you know, I'm a conservative, you're a conservative. I think a lot of the thing that conservatives think in California is, my vote doesn't even count, right? They don't even, like, I'm not going to even try because it's such a liberal state. It's too far gone. What would you have to say to that person?
Well, actually, I blame us as conservatives. You know, we always want to talk about, oh, it's a liberal state, it's this, it's that. It's like, we need to look internally. How have we not been able to grab these individuals that if you talk to them on a one-on-one basis, they actually agree with us? Right. I look at a lot of the Latino population, and, you know, a huge portion of them vote Democrat or they vote liberal, even though their values, very patriarchal, believe in gendered roles and believe in the system of the family fabric more than most populations. And yet they support ideals right now that do not align with their values. That's the part where I blame us as conservatives, because we weren't able to market to those people and talk to them in a way that they can understand. We've allowed somebody else to create the narrative. We've allowed them to tell our picture on how we see the world. That's the part that I have an issue with being a conservative, is that we need to be at their doorstep saying, like, did you know that you're voting for these things? Did you know that you're voting against your values because somebody has been lying to you about the story? Conservatives are horrible storytellers. Absolutely horrible.
So growing up in the neighborhood that you grew up in, what do you think that person, you're talking to that person right now, what do you think that person thinks about the average conservative?
This is actually perfect. So a couple of weeks ago, I went back home to Sacramento, went to go see my mom and my dad and hang out with everybody. And I went to go get a haircut from a barber that I grew up with, went to high school. And she thinks, sees on Instagram that I'm running for office. And she's like, well, you're running for office. And, well, everybody knows I'm conservative because I'm open and I'm about it. And they go, you grew up with us. Why are you conservative? Like, why are you different? And I say, look at the state of look at North Highlands. We grew up. It's been controlled for the last 40 years by liberal ideology and democratic control. Can we say today that it is better now than it was 10 years ago? No, because now we have way too much homelessness. Nobody can afford anything. It's so expensive there that, again, we talked about the average home price. And even though that average home price there is $400,000, $425,000, that's a $3,200 mortgage for people in North Highlands who, where's our high-paying jobs coming from? Where's anything coming from that allows the individual who grew up there to be able to get to that next level? And so we're talking, and she's telling me, she's like, why are you conservative? And then I look at it and I say the state of California since 1978 has been dominated by one-party rule. You cannot blame a single thing since 1978, and the last time they held the Senate, Ronald Reagan was the governor, and the Assembly was in the 70s. Where we're at today cannot be blamed on a single Republican at all. Cannot be blamed on a single conservative, because there's been one-party rule that allowed anything to get through. And so I asked him, I was like, why are we so stuck in not questioning who's been in charge? And how did they get us to hate that ideology? And it's easy because they've told the story, but they don't even get to open the door. And that's where my friends back home, I've actually been able to convince a huge majority of them to actually say, well, I see it now. I hear you talking about it. I grew up, lived in that experience. And now they go and they check and they're like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. Like these policies, they don't make sense. It's just like, there's an example that I use where we could just be smart. So in 2002, there's an environmental Energies Commission, or I might be messing up the name there, that set limits on the energy production that wasn't considered green or renewable energy at 30 megawatts for certain facilities. So hydroelectrical energy, any facility that made and produced over 30 megawatts is not considered green and renewable. But if it's a low scale or small scale hydroelectrical facility under 30 megawatts, it is considered green and renewable. By doing that, they created a scarcity problem that means that the individual at the bottom of the totem pole now has to pay higher energy prices, higher energy cost, because we have a lower supply. With that, if we are able to just have common sense rules, let's open up the large-scale hydroelectrical production, which will increase the supply and lower the cost because there will be so much supply. The state of California and those in charge will not do it. They won't do it. Why? Because they want the scarcity issue. They want the individuals to be dependent on that. I tell people that if we embolden the individual and give you the power to take care of your own family by keeping money in your pocket, that is the only person who's going to come and help your family.
I love that, man. Let's talk about some of these bills as far as real estate. So we spoke about this, I think yesterday, right? A couple props. I'm not super familiar with it. I probably need to get more involved and follow it a little bit more closely. Let's jump into that a little bit. What props are changing the taxes? And
for the real estate market and the real estate individuals that are actually thinking about this, the scariest one that I think would be truly the end of business in Sacramento, in California, is if they do some repeals on Prop 13. So Prop 13 was put back in the 70s that kept that the purchase price of what you purchase a property at is kind of where your tax basis is done on that property assessment. If you buy a house for $400,000, they assess it around that with the land value. And so what they want to do as a change to that is actually put it to a land value tax. So instead of, if your family owned property in the 1970s, 1980s, and they bought it for $40,000, they're paying taxes around that. That will then be reassessed to, well, if that land was $40,000 then, but now it's worth $500,000 to $600,000 because across the street it's a commercial complex. That property land value is the same as that commercial property, even though it's a vacant. You will be paying the same taxes because of the potential on it. So that could change $40,000 taxes that you are paying all the way up to $600,000, $700,000, and it has nothing on it. It's just a vacant piece of property, and that will be for every single property. In California, the only thing that keeps some of our things affordable is that we have some of the lowest property taxes. It's the only area that they haven't been able to touch, and that's just because in the 1970s, they saw that as we need to protect property values. And so they did that way back then, and that is the only thing, in my opinion, that truly keeps California affordable. Because think about the same thing when it comes to a home. If they're able to change that, what is it? In Fresno County, it's 1.24%. Some of the areas that are covered by Clovis, it's 1.3 something percent. Think about that taxes at 3%, 4%, on top of 6% interest rates, on top of the highest home prices in the entire state, in the entire union.
That doesn't make any sense. What would that do to the average family that, let's say, they inherited a home from their grandparents And go into that. What would that do to the average family?
Well, I really think it actually hurts the individual at the average family at the bottom that wants to be a homeowner, because that's where I look at it is, they've been able to absorb. So if they got a house from their grandfather or grandparent, maybe they don't have a mortgage on it. At least they have savings on that cost. But it's the individual, like myself. I mean, I bought a house when I was 24 years old, and I helped my parents buy a house as well when I was 22 years old.
That's amazing.
And so I look at that as my parents wouldn't have been able to buy a house there's no way we wouldn't have been able to afford at that time, $2,000-ish mortgage. And luckily my father's a veteran, so he gets like USAA insurance and he gets all these other tax benefits. But that's not the same thing for my friends that I grew up in North Highlands. That's not the same thing for the Latino family that some of them are not from here and they're illegal immigrants that came here but are hardworking. They can't afford to do those things and include a 4% taxes on that because that changes the mortgage. That monthly right there is what's going to ruin them. And I think about that individual. There's no way they can escape that generational poverty because home ownership, it's the number one factor to breaking generational poverty because then I can buy a house and I can pass it on to my family. My parents own a house and my brothers are now protected, And I look at it at that is the affordability rate will disappear.
You bring a good point. California is already so unaffordable with housing, right? Even in Fresno, we're starting to see the home prices rise up now. We have this inventory crisis. So no matter what you do, people are like, oh, the prices are going to drop. The reality is it's driven by supply and demand, right? There's no supply. There's still good demand. I wouldn't say it was demand of 21, but even though the demand has dropped, there's not enough supply. So it's still driving prices up. So now we talk about a bill changing the taxes too, making the taxes go up. You're already at a $3,000 payment for a $400,000
house,
right? And in $400,000 here in Fresno, that used to get you 5 years ago something extremely nice. And now, I mean, it's still a nice home, but it's not anywhere to the extent of what it was. So I think that's why a lot of people are moving to Texas and Florida and Idaho and these other areas that are more affordable. So
well, that's where I look at when it comes to Texas. Texas has really high property taxes, like 8-9%, like very, very high, but they don't have a state income tax on top of that. We have essentially all of it. We have a state income tax. We have federal tax. We have property taxes, even though they're low. We pay taxes on everything. We have a sales tax. The state of California, you pay taxes on taxes that you've already paid. Right. Like, it's ridiculous. And that's the part that I look at it is that, and again, this to the race that I'm running, last year we had a $96 billion surplus. I mean, we had a $96 billion surplus in the state of California. This year we're already projected a $30 billion deficit. And today is supposed to be the day that they finalize the budget. And it's going to increase the deficit on that because we're doing things that are wrong. I think we need to get back to the basics. I look at our schools. If we're doing public schooling, we shouldn't be 49th out of 50 in all of the states as the fourth largest economy. Like, all of it is being done wrong that we need to focus on just making California, just bringing back the focus to California and really looking at it from a common sense approach.
Speaking on budgets and things of that nature, right? Maybe you can key into this a little bit. The homeless problem in LA and San Fran and these areas, how does that get solved? I want to tell a little bit of a story here. So I was working with a client. He was moving from San Fran to Fresno, and he was tired of it. He couldn't stand it. He was working for, I think, the city or the county there. And he said he actually had drug people that were getting put into 4-star, 3-star hotels, had nurses coming in 3 times a day administering them their drugs and giving them 3 meals a day. That's what he said. I don't know if it's 100% true.
No, it's probably 100% true.
But you think about that, and we're enabling these people to do this, and we're not really giving them help, right? We're not giving them the help that they need. So how do we create a solution for that, do you think?
So the issue truly is that those on the other side of the aisle, and when it comes to my thought, is that they've been able to push policy in the guise of compassion. I'm going to take care of this homeless person and, oh, look, they do drugs. So what's the best way that I could protect them? Let me give them a clean needle so they can go ahead and do drugs. And I come from a family that has a lot of lived drug experience. I have very, very close relatives of mine that got caught up in some bad things, and they. You don't tell those individuals that it's okay to do drugs. And that is the mindset that we have here in California. We tell them it's okay to go ahead and do drugs because we'll supplement your ability and give you a clean needle. We say it's okay to live on the street. It's okay to pee in a bush right there. It's okay to do that because we want to be nice and friendly. Some of these individuals, they do need structure. They need some standards to say like, hey, we're here to help you, but you also have to help yourself. Apparently right now in the state of California, if you tell them that they have to help themselves, you are bad, evil, horrible, and you hate homeless individuals. Right. That's not right. That's backwards thinking. We have to tell that person like, hey, you cannot sleep on the sidewalk. We need you to come and receive services if you want benefits. We have too many working-aged individuals that there was I don't know if you saw that video went viral of a guy from Denver. He said, I heard California gives out money. I'm going to go. He comes out here, lives in San Francisco. They sign him up. He gets $600 a month. He has a free cell phone because most people don't know there's programs that you can actually get a free cell phone. I know that because I have family that have free cell phones, and you can call. There's Wi-Fi calling. You download an app and you can message anybody that you want. They have free cell phone. They live in a tent. They're in San Francisco. They make $600. He doesn't want services. Why would he want services? This individual has mental health issues, wants to sleep on the sidewalk because they're not confined by the structure of society. They're a free individual. But we need rules. We need standards to say, if we want to clean up this area, we cannot allow them to do these things. It's the same thing that happened. It's destroying my community right now. Roseville Road, the road at the end of the street, is the McDonald's that I worked at on Watt and Myrtle. There's 200, 300 homeless people that live right there, and we're just okay with it. We, as a community, need to say we're not okay with it. $5 billion was spent on homelessness, I believe, within the past year, and what do we have to show for it? Worse homelessness. We have worse. Another big factor that I think about is when the state of California let individuals out of prison, they didn't even allow some of them to call their family members. If you are a nonviolent offender, they walked into your cell, said, you got to leave. COVID's coming. That individual didn't have the chance to call their family. And what family member is going to pick up their phone from prison and say, hey, yeah, you were just in prison for 20 years or 5 years or 6 years. You can just come live with me. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of families that are not going to do that. They have to take care of their own. So what happened to that individual that may have been going to get their GED and they're getting clean there? They pushed them out to the streets because all the group homes filled up. All the group homes filled up because they let everybody out at the same time. That individual now ends up on the street. Now he recommits. Now he has to steal for food. Now he falls back into depression. Now he goes back and he does drugs, and now it just ruined their life. Right. That is the process that we're creating. That is something that we need to get out of our way and say, there has to be something better. You can't be a state with the most homeless in the entire union and say we can fix it, and we're making it worse.
Well, that's the question. Do we even have enough at this point of resources to help these people? I mean, there's so many of them on the street that don't have housing. Mm-hmm. We probably can't provide all of them housing. What's the solution to that? Well,
and that's where I look. The solution is actually we need to lower the cost of living, and we have to get out of California's own way. We have the Sierras. The Sierras right now are so overpopulated when it comes to trees and the amount of tree density because we haven't allowed individuals to go into the forest and properly manage them and use that.
Another question about that.
Well, yeah. But that's where I look at, and it's something that I'm actually working on right now as a white page policy. Simple. If we want to make affordable housing, we need affordable material. Right now, we think in this mindset of, it feels good in California not to touch our own forests or use our own resources. So instead, we'll just truck it in from Montana, or we'll just truck it in from Arizona. That doesn't make any sense because actually, if you do a carbon emissions rating on that, you know that the trucked miles in from pulling trees, maybe the same amount of trees, into California adds more carbon emissions. The same thing comes from their driving miles that it comes from Arizona. But if we were able to use our own resources here, properly manage the forest, use a lot of these. So in Fresno County alone, we have over 20 million dead trees. In Tulare County, There's over 25 million dead trees, 50 million dead trees. If those trees are harvested within 3 years, you're able to use some of it as some building material. You cannot build affordable housing without affordable material.
So that was the question I was going to get into, is about the dead trees, right? We just had, was it Shaver that just everything burned down a couple of years ago?
The creek fire, yeah.
Right? And it was a massive fire. And a lot of that was because we're not managing the forest very well, correct? We're not picking up the dead trees and things of that nature. Why? Why aren't, like, I feel like that's, like you're mentioning, common sense. That's common sense. What's wrong with picking up dead trees so that there's not just, obviously dead wood burns like crazy. So why wouldn't we pick that stuff up? What on the other side of the aisle, why are they stopping it?
It all goes back to the narrative, is that back in the 70s, when clear cutting at that time did happen, they would clear cut, they would replant, but the idea of it was shown that you hate the environment. And if they push an idea that those individuals hate the environment, they hate the animals, the hunters are the evil, worst, horrible people and all of this, then it creates somebody who doesn't really participate in the forest. They go, wow, that person hates everything about this area. I'm not going to support them. So we've let the forest go. But the issue when it came to these individuals arguing, well, nature should be nature, our issue was we got so good at fighting wildfires that we really put out wildfires really quickly. And so what that did was bank trees. Trees were being, low-level trees that would have died off in a low-ground creeping fire, would have killed the shrubbery and all of that, would have been killed if a fire had naturally gone through once every year, once every 5 years, once every 10 years. But for 40 years, we didn't allow some of these areas. So now we have medium growth trees that now take some of the water for that, provide some shade, which allows the other trees to really not get the sustenance that they needed to be a true healthy tree to outlive some of these fires. So by that scarcity of resources for the trees, we have really weak trees that then you get bark beetle. Bark beetle comes and destroys everything. If a bark beetle bores, and that's what it's called boring, where it goes all the way around, the tree's dead. Like the tree can no longer sustain because the membrane no longer is connected all the way through. And so it's kind of getting way too much into tree science, but that's where they created that narrative of us hating it. So then we're not allowed to go into the forest because of policy simply. But if I told them that you'd never plant 1,000 tomatoes in a 1x1 square box, the tomatoes will never grow. They can't share the resources. There's not enough nutrition. But that's what we've done for our forest here because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel good that we don't touch our own forest, but instead we'll go and we'll truck it in from Montana. It doesn't make any sense. It's the same trees in Montana that are being taken, that we can do it here and properly manage our forest. Wow. That's what protects individuals. It protects our people who live in the Sierras. The reason why we have unaffordable insurance, fire insurance. My family lost a house in the creek fire.
Wow.
I mean, and this is part of my extended family. They lost a house in the creek fire, but I remember being there just 2 weeks before the creek fire, and a lot of our forests are managed by the U.S. Forest Service, 97% in California. But but they stacked logs around the U.S. Forest Service ground because they had nowhere to put them because all of the lumber mills, all of the areas for lumber storage were closed down. I think there's only 6 in the state of California. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. The Auberry Mill site used to be one of the number 1 mill sites that actually used to process trees. The individual who owns it right now is trying to get it back, but there's a lot of people that would rather fight, and specifically towards the environmentalists, that they're really not environmentalists, they're obstructionists, and they would rather see people live in scarcity because of some general idea that they have this is normal. They want
to create a narrative. They want to create
they have created the narrative.
Yeah, they want people to think of conservatives in a certain way, correct?
Yep.
So I have to play devil's advocate here. Is there anything on the conservative side that we think about, let's say the other side, that we're trying to create a narrative? I just want to ask that.
I would say no. And that's actually part of it. It's my biggest issue with conservatives is actually we don't know how to talk to the regular person. Right. We like to throw pie charts, graphs, numbers, all of these things. I can tell you this, when I was in high school, there's not many people who are the math people. There's not many people who are the science people. There's a reason why engineering is a high-paying job because they are very, there's a small pool of those individuals.
Right.
We need to be better at talking to people. And so that is what those on the other side have done a really good job at, just painting the narrative. I think about it right now. They've done an idea where it's like you hear the word Republican, it's synonymous with racist, with a lot of the individuals that I grew up with. And it's a hard stop for them because they know I'm not like that. And even though I'm the lightest one out of my family, they see my brother and they're like, yeah, well, Rob's my brother's name is Rob. They're like, he's definitely a minority. It's a joke that they used to say. They're like, yeah, Rob's a minority, but you're not. And I find it funny, but it's where I can have those conversations and just talk to them. I was like, you've been lied to. You've been lied to, and you need to wake up. Like, you need to wake up because the reason why you can't buy a house right now is because they want you to be dependent on the government. We're creating that side wants everything to be centralized and focused there. They want socialism. Well,
essentially, right? In a nutshell, or they want
centralized, controlled power is more of it, because socialism is like, it's just a brand term that a lot of people really don't understand. But they want centralized power because I think a lot of people could see that. But it's where I think Republicans do need to be better at painting the narrative. But this is where I look at it, and we have the opportunity, is that they actually give us everything that a huge population of people do not agree with, and we're not doing anything with it. Like, I think about what just passed the floor yesterday, AB 957. It is a bill that basically says to a parent that you cannot instill values into your child, but the state has the right.
Did that pass?
It passed the assembly yesterday, so it has to go to the Senate after that. So it passed the assembly.
What's the likelihood that it passes the Senate?
100%. 100% that will pass.
Is it a federal thing, or is it nationwide?
No. It's a state. It's a state bill. So and this is where, like, 100%.
So there's no concern. I mean, see, this is where I probably need, the average conservative overall needs to get more educated, right, with politics and things of that nature, I think. But how many conservatives are in the Senate right now versus Democrats?
Oh, it's absolutely embarrassing. But I'll say what AB 957 is. So AB 957 states that if a parent doesn't affirm their child's ideology, their vision of what they think they are at any age, whether it's 4 years old, 3 years old, 1 year old, that if a parent doesn't affirm that they may think that they're a boy or they may think that they're a girl, that parent has committed child abuse on them, and it gives the state the right to take away that child and to place them where they think that it is okay to go. That is the state now saying, the government now saying that they can put values into children and they can push that where that's the scary thing. That
they want to kill the family unit is what they want to do, obviously, right?
Well,
that's scary to me, man. Having a 4-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and almost a 2-year-old, it makes me second guess about staying in California, because that's just that ain't right.
That's actually insane that you say that, because Senator Scott Wilk yesterday specifically said that he's been fighting for parent rights and all of that, and then he looked at it and that bill came out and he said, if you love your child, get out of California. This is a man that lived here his entire life, has been fighting for common sense for California. And he said, if you are a parent in California right now, if you want to protect your kids, get out of California. Because right now the state is saying is that we get the right, the government, state of California gets to instill values. And if you don't listen, I get to take your child away. I think people are that is a very, very dangerous area to go, where conservatives like yourself and I look at, but that's where, again, it goes back to kind of blaming conservatives. If I can't go to a Latino family and tell them, like, you as a patriarchal, father figure in your house, you can't tell your kid, hey,
how did that pass?
It passed the assembly. It will go to the Senate, but it passed because now back to the structure of, like, as conservatives, are we fighting? Are we trying? There's 19 conservative assemblymen in a house of 80. 19. We're smaller than a minority. We're a super minority. We have less than 1/3. This is where I tell people, to effectuate change, you have to win. Your ideals have to win. California is getting everything that it voted for. Californians just don't know what they're voting for. That's the issue. And we, as conservatives, look internally. What can we control? We haven't been able to do a good job at telling those individuals, did you know that you were voting for this? Did you know, as a Latino family, that you cannot instill your values. Actually, this is the biggest part that I don't understand, is that those on the other side have brought in like a religious group, got the Sisterhood of Perpetual Indulgence, that is an open mockery of the Catholic religion. And that when they brought them in to the floor, they gave a standing ovation, the loudest one. But if you go back and you sent that to a Latino family that goes to church every Sunday, potentially on Thursdays, they like to go to Mass, and you said this group, which on Easter did a fake crucifixion of Jesus Christ, made a huge mockery. That is what those individuals are voting for. That's our fault.
That is insane.
But that's our
That is
fault.
insane.
That's our fault
Right.
at not being able to tell that story. Then if you look at the Senate as well, on the Senate side, we only have 8, I think. 8, and we lost one with Senate District 4 after a huge debacle on ours. There is a conservative seat out there for the mountain community, and we lost it because our plan did not work out, because there was no plan there. And so we are trying to bring back, and that's part of the goal, is actually if we can just get out of the super minority and show up. Because what that means in being in the super minority means that all Republicans don't even need to show up. We don't even need to go to work, and they can pass whatever bill they want because they have quorum. They have more than 2/3 present, which that's how you vote. You have to have more than 2/3 present. We can just stay home. We can hang out. We can go drink at the bar. We don't even need to show up to work, and they can pass 100% of all bills that they want.
That is insane. So, dude, I'm stuck on that fake crucifixion, right? For me, I think that's almost, there's something deeper at play at that point, right? I mean, that's demonic, right? That's sick. And the fact that we allow them to mock Jesus and things of that nature is crazy. Yeah, that's just nuts.
Well, it's
That's
the thing.
nuts.
It's where I look at it from, and you got to be data driven in California. You know, there are 10 million registered Democrats to 5.3 million registered Republicans. There is almost a 2-to-1 advantage. And if we really need to get to an approach, and this is for the entire state of California, is saying, look, the government doesn't play a role in certain things. Their religious freedom, whatever they want to do, I do not condone it. But I also, as a government official, I do not believe that it is my right to tell them not to do something socially or all of that. It's the same thing. Like if somebody wants to go and LARP and run around or, get dressed up and different things, like it's not me as a conservative. The government doesn't have the right to tell them, no, they can't do that, even though I hate it and I don't agree with it. Right. Especially when it comes to like a fake crucifixion. Right. It's the same thing that I look at as we just need to get back to the basics. And a winning message for people is saying is like, California, you can't afford anything. You can't buy a house. You can't get out of trying to just be a normal person. Homelessness is worse. Can we just get back to focusing on these things? The fact that our schools are 49th out of 50 in education, 49th out of 50 in education, yet we're worried about all these social issues when the individuals graduating can't read at a 12th grade reading level, can't do math at a 12th grade level, they can't do science, they don't know history, they don't understand everything, but yet the biggest focus that we're all worried about is some social issue that's out there that has to do with somebody else living whatever life they want. And I say, as an 18-year-old or consenting adult, you go live the best you. Go embolden the individual to go do whatever they want. But let's do the basics right. Build roads, bridges, create infrastructure, lower the cost of living, build affordable housing with affordable material, manage the forest properly, because that way we protect the individuals who live in the foothills, lower insurance rates, make it make sense, and then you can tackle the social issues. But we have no rights as Californian officials to talk about these social issues if we're failing our people on a basic level.
Dude, thank you, man. This is awesome. Thank you for coming on. Is there any last things that you want to leave the audience with?
Well, I don't know if
this has been a packed podcast, man. This has been awesome.
Well, it's I think I make it sound so dreary and all these things, but actually I have hope. I have hope because I look at what happened in Glendale, and you have the Armenian Eastern Orthodox community and the Muslim community standing next to each other in solidarity against some of the crazy policies of those on the far, far left. And that threw them for a loop. It really threw them for a loop because they looked at this like, well, I can't beat them in the head with white, cis, racist, because they use it as a really heavy hammer. But I have hope because I see individuals like that standing up and just, those are the individuals that we need to talk to and bring back common sense. It's the same thing. If Virginia, the second bluest state in the union, can go and nominate and elect Glenn Youngkin, who's a conservative in that area that's doing a lot of work, we could do the same thing here, but we need to vote for somebody who deeply, deeply cares for this area. I love it. I'm not going anywhere else. I've made a promise to everybody. I'm not leaving California because I don't believe we deserve to leave California until we get to fix this place. It's something that I look at. The governor right now is traveling across the nation, and he's saying California's the model. And actually, I think he's right. We are the model. We're the model to never do what's happening here and to make sure that individuals' resumes matter. Never Newsom. I say that. You look at San Francisco. Is it better today than it was before Gavin Newsom? No. Is the state of California better today than before Gavin Newsom? No. So then he should not be able to fail upwards. And we just need to see that a little bit better. And it's those areas that I think about. My campaign is built on Californians. It's built on common sense. It's built on take care of us, because I know my family at the bottom of the totem pole needs help. They need help to be empowered to take care of themselves, not for the government to take care of them. That's why I'm running on my campaign. It's something that I can go into a barbershop and I can talk to all those individuals there, and I could walk into a business meeting and I can talk to all those individuals there. I relay it across the board, and I'd love to have some people support me. They could check out my website at
shoot them your Instagram, all that stuff. Yeah,
I know I'm getting used to the whole pitch thing, and so. And it's not real estate, but they could find me at David Tangipa for assembly.com, and they can email me as well at David@DavidTangipa for assembly. And the easiest way to spell my last name is Tang IPA. I'm trying to get a beer can that is a little bit mandarins from some of the homegrown oranges and all of that right here in the Central Valley to just have like a novelty can. And it's built on a lot of work, and it's something that I'm excited about because we need hope, because that's all we got right now, especially with what's coming out. And I want to bring some of that hope with me, and I want to help infect the entire state with just common sense ideals.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on, David. It was awesome, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And hey, we've come a long way together. And I love that. I love seeing all of us kind of grow up, and it's one of the number one things that I love.
Awesome, dude. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bro.